Hello everybody, welcome back to another Ableton tutorial. Lovely to have you here. So, what am I going to look at today? Well, you read the title, using household things to make music. Some house music, if you will. It's Sunday, you allow me a little pun, thank you very much. So, I got inspired by Andrew Huang's video on making music with a kitchen pot. Link in the description below if you want to check that out. And I thought, hey, let's look at that. Let's combine some simple techniques to look at how we can make all sorts of sounds using stuff around the house. So let's start at the start and let's explore this. Let's stop all of that. So the first thing I did was just to record a bunch of metal objects from all around my house. I used two Rode condenser microphones, and occasionally a contact microphone. You could use your phone. You could use whatever microphones you've got to hand just to record a bunch of stuff from around your house. So I ended up, after recording and chopping them, with a bunch of things that sound like this. That's just a small selection. I made sort of 150 samples, and Patreon members will be able to download that entire sample pack for free. And also the racks that I'm going to make from them today. Non-Patreon members, you can access that post, including the downloads for the sample pack and for the racks for the low price of €3. What a bargain. Okay, that's my ad over. Thanks to everyone for the support on Patreon. It does mean a lot. So I've got my samples, I've done some recording, I've chopped them up, I've organized them. What did I then do with them? Well, I made 3 racks, and everything you heard at the start of this video was made from these 3 racks and from those 150 samples. A little bit of EQ and compression and reverb, and that was it. No other sounds involved at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the 3 racks, and we're going to build the second and the third one. The first one here is sort of a relatively stock standard drum rack. I took sounds like this sound of a kitchen pot, and I turned it into a kick drum using a little bit of some pitch envelope stuff and a little bit of transient shapers. We then have some long hits, some knocking stuff, some wire brushes, some flicking, sort of a lid crash that I turned into a crash. Yeah. And using those, I just mapped it in a fairly sort of standard drum beat setup, and you get stuff that sounds like this. So far, so normal, but let's take a look at the second and the third racks. So the second rack, I'm just going to solo that. I'm just going to press play on this MIDI loop, which just has 3 notes in it. And let's look at some of the presets that I made here. This is the initial patch, the init patch. We have sounds like some glitchy cave. Something that sounds like a work site, some sort of digital crickets. So let's press stop on that, and let's take a look at how to build that and how to go about it. Yeah. So first things first, I'm going to bring in a drum rack. So I'm going to go to Instruments, bring in a new drum rack, drag and drop that over in here. Let's put it next to you. Right, and let's solo that for now. And to begin with, I'm also just going to copy across that one MIDI clip that's just got these 3 notes on it. It says Hyperchop because that was telling me what presets I wanted to use during the intro when you heard all those bits and pieces. So that does not matter at all. Right, so the first thing I did was then go to my samples that I've made, my household metals, and I just dragged in all of the little samples that I could find. So for instance, well, no, that's not so little. Here we go. So I grabbed all of the samples like this. I dragged that one onto C1. I changed a couple of settings. We want it in classic mode, and we want snap off. And then I went and did that for a whole bunch of samples. Snap off classic mode. Sometimes what I did also, so if I had something like this, a small little rattle with lots of different sounds, I used all of those different sounds. So again, first thing, switch it to classic, snap off, and find that first sound. Then I can simply hit Option, drag that across, and get the second sound in there. And I did this process with all of the sounds, all the little hitty type sounds that I had recorded, until I had roughly 48 sounds in here. So I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward through this whole bit. Okay, so I now have 48 samples loaded in. Different things all cut up. I forgot there is one other setting that needs to be changed on the simplers, which is that we need it to be set to gate mode instead of trigger mode. So to do that, we go to One Shot and we click on gate instead of trigger. And helpfully, if I now right click, I can copy value to siblings. So I don't need to go through and do that for every one. I can just do that, and now we switch this back to classic mode, and now it should be on gate mode, exactly. So what that means is that the sample stops playing as soon as things are stopped being held down. So I have 48 samples, so I can now, well, if I was to play this MIDI clip, it would of course play the corresponding samples. Exactly like that, exactly as we'd expected. So the first thing I want to do is make a rhythm out of that instead of just single hits. So I'm going to use a MIDI effect arpeggiator. So now I can press play on this. And now it's cycling through those 3 samples. And of course, if I were to change these notes, we get all kind of different permutations of that rhythm. I could also, of course, change the arpeggiator style, the rate perhaps. Let's go back to just up and go back to here. Of course, the steps then also brings in a really interesting thing, because what this will do is it will play the MIDI notes that are 1 octave up, and thus the corresponding different samples. Or we can make patterns that... Now, of course, we have the arpeggiator gate here, which can give us super short notes or some long notes. So all of these things, these 3 things are really interesting to modulate. I'm just going to leave it like that for now and look at some things that we might want to modulate over here on the simpler as well. So I'm going to just set this to play 1 note, and I would just want it to be the lowest note for now. And I need to turn the steps back. Okay, so what is... Ooh, that's not quite... That's better. Okay, so what are some things that I might like to be able to change about this? Well, of course, attack and release are going to be some things. Volume is going to be a thing. Actually, first of all, I'm going to do volume. So I'm just going to right-click, map to macro 1. And I'm also going to right-click and map to all siblings. And I'm going to do that at every step along the way, so that every sample is being affected by the same macro controls. Now, another thing that's going to be interesting to be able to turn on and off is the loop, because, well, at the moment, the loop's not doing anything because it covers the whole thing. But if I bring the loop length down, we get some interesting things. So, of course, loop length, loop on and off, map to macro 2, right-click, copy value to all siblings. No, map to all siblings. and I want to make this clear which is on and which is off, so I'm going to rename this. So loop off on. I know that there it's off and there it's turned on. Okay, and as we saw, loop length is going to be an interesting thing to modulate. And also the sample start. We're going to get some super different results doing that. Okay, so I'm going to map that to macro 3. Map to all siblings. I'm going to map that to macro 4. Map to all siblings. Okay. And I think perhaps the release, yes, because 60 seconds, which is set as the default. I'm going to also map that to macro 5. Map to all siblings. Oh. Why is that? Of course, that's the end of the note. But I can control that length exactly here. So the reason I've mapped the release here is because we can really use this to shape the sound. So if I bring the gate right, so I've got the release all the way down, and if I bring the gate down, we'll get this super choppy sound, and I can add a little bit of tail to that. So it's not quite so choppy. So this allows us to really sort of shape the sound here. Let's leave that somewhere around there, and let's put the gate back here for now. Okay, I think that's. Yeah, I've mapped that to all siblings, haven't I? Okay, so we have some interesting things we can play with here. Let's bring in some other notes and just see how that feels. So let's try turning the loop on. Let's try turning the sample length down. Okay, we're able to get some cool glitchy kind of effects there. What's going to accentuate that is also being able to modulate the pitch. So I'm going to come in here, controls. I'm still on small hit 1. I'm going to right click, transpose, map to macro 6. I'm going to map to all siblings. Yeah, of course. So now we'll turn the loop stuff on. Some nice, interesting results beginning to happen there. Okay, and now I think also I want to be able to, some volume to velocity stuff. So I'm going to right click, map to macro 7. Right click, map to all siblings. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this drum rack and the arpeggiator into a group. So now I'm going to press Command G. Turn that into a group. And I'm going to map these macros to the macros of the group. So I'm going to right click, map to macro 1. I'm going to right click, map to macro 2. Map to macro 3. Map to macro 4. The velocity, I'm actually going to need all of these macros here, so I'm going to open up them all. The velocity, I want to do that to macro 15, just to make it a nice, simple layout. The transpose, I think, let's map that to macro 5. And the release, let's map that to macro 14. Okay, now let's map some things from the arpeggiator. So actually, I think it would be interesting to be able to turn the arpeggiator on and off in case I want to just program in a pattern instead of have a rhythmic pattern. So I'm going to right-click, map that to, undo. I want to maybe put all the arpeggiator stuff in here. So map to macro 9. Device. Yep, okay, and I'm going to up, off and on like that. The rate, I'm going to map to macro 10. Up rate, And I'm going to map, let's map a sync next to that. So map to macro 11. Up, sync, off, on. So let's, off is there and on is there. I probably want to connect this rate as well. So I'm going to map that to ARP rate to the same one. And now, okay, so now we can control the ARP rate, whether the sync is on or off. That's really nice. Oh, that's cool. So that means we can get like these kind of effects. That's nice. Okay, let's map the steps to macro 12. And let's also map the gate to macro 13. Let's turn the sync back on because that's slightly annoying. Okay, right. So the volume to the velocity thing is going to be quite interesting if we bring in some random velocity. So I'm going to use that on macro 16. I'm going to bring a velocity plugin here. And I'm going to put that after the arpeggiator. Yep, so this is exactly so that every note that comes out of the arpeggiator is going to be randomly velocityed. So I'm going to map that to macro 16. I'm going to map that to macro 16. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to map the random to macro 16 here as well. So I need to change some mapping parameters because when it's like this, I want it to be the straight diagonal line. So like that, the output high needs to be 127. So I go to macro 16, velocity output high, 127. And then all the way up, I want it to be 64. So that output high is now doing what it needs to do. And output low needs to go from 0 to 64. So as I turn that up, the line becomes horizontal and we get a lot of random velocities. So if I turn the... Cool. So I'm now able to get some really interesting velocity, random variation stuff happening in there. Right. Okay. I think also some reverb at the end of this whole thing is going to be nice. So I'm going to put that at the end of the whole chain. So let's bring in a reverb. Let's just use a standard reverb here, and I want it here. So this affects every sample, not just individual samples. Let's double click on you for now. Okay, and I'm going to set this up as a chain because I want it to be a send. So I'm going to bring in a utility in front of it. Reverb 100% wet. I'm going to select all of that. I'm going to group that. And I want to be able to control this value here, the amount of thing getting sent into the reverb. So I'm going to right click, map to macro 1, change that so it only goes up to 0. Yep. So that's now our send going into a reverb. Right click, let's map that to macro 6. Verb send. Yeah. Let's also map, not the dry wet, but the decay. Let's map you to macro 2, and then that needs to go to macro 7. Okay, and now I want this to be a dry... Exactly. Yeah. So now... Yeah. Nice. I need to rename this random velocity. Okay. This is quite nice. I've got one spare macro. Let's color some of these. Let's make all the ARP stuff white. Let's make the sample start stuff whatever color that is. Verb stuff, you can all be whatever color that is. Pink, lovely deserty pink, maybe? I don't know. The velocity stuff, let's make you that color. And that's kind of connected with that. Oh, so okay. Oh, yeah, that works. Transpose, let's make you that color. Volume, that should be kind of an obvious color. Okay, so there we have some stuff. Let's try playing around with that. So we can shut that now. Let's open the macro variations like this, and let's create a sort of init patch. Yeah, let's turn the reverb off for that, of course. Let's turn the steps are down. The ARP is on a fairly obvious sync rate. In fact, yeah, let's loop is off. Let's save that as an init patch. One that we can always come back to. So then we can just begin to explore things. What happens if we turn the gate up here? Some steps. Tiny bit of verb on that. I mean, a long verb, but a tiny send. And let's introduce some random velocity. And of course, this changes drastically if I just change these 3 notes. That's quite nice. I think I want, on the ARP, I think I want to change the steps, back so it's... That could be an interesting thing to map to macro 8, of course. In fact, yeah, let's do that. Let's map that to macro 8. Okay, and let's color that white because it goes with the ARP stuff. It would be nice. Maybe I should put it down there. I'm going to switch it. No, I'm not going to switch it. Okay, so let's just put this back down to here, to here. This is nice. Right, and let's save that as a new preset. That's kind of meandering around. Now, because I've added this new macro here, I need to make sure that the init preset still works. So let's put this back to 0. 0, and let's save the init preset. So that was exactly how I built this patch. And then I just went through and made a bunch of presets. Often what I do when I'm making presets is as simple as press random. And you get some cool results. This is nice. Yeah. And then I sort of tweak the patch a bit. Knowing how the patch has been built makes it a lot easier to tweak. Actually, one other thing that I'm going to do, let's add a limiter to the end of the whole thing, because I think the volume gradation is going to be quite intense on some of them. No, somewhere around there. Yeah, because of course the sample start is really going to affect the quality of the sounds. Although I really like this. This is nice. Let's save that. Deep bell. Okay, so let's press stop on that. And now let's look at this other patch over here. This patch. So let's solo it and let's listen to some of the presets. An init preset. In fact, I'm going to use my Ableton push to trigger this because it's going to be quicker and easier. Choppy presets. So I did add a utility at the end of all of this because I found that some of these gains were really quite varied on these, and I'd run out of macros. Some waves. some kind of binary chopping, some radio noise. So all of these are made using the same patch, as you can hear. Let's have a look at what's going on in this patch. So in this case, what I'm going to do is bring in a simpler. Let's go Instruments, Simpler. And this uses all of the bowed stuff that I recorded from my day of making samples. So I'm going to go back in here, and I have a whole folder of bowed stuff. So what I did was get a violin bow and use that to bow metal sheets, and there's some bowed cymbals and stuff as well. And in here I have found this huge metal sheet. It's actually for making gnocchi and other Italian type doughs, but it just sounded incredible. I of course recognize that you can't hear that in the previews. So first of all, I'm just going to bring in a bowed sound. So I'm just going to drag that in here. I'm going to give it some extra gain. And this is what we're going to use exactly like that. We're going to use this to sort of begin to make this sound. Okay, so one of the things I want to be able to do is to chop the sound in terms of volume. I'm going to do this using a utility plugin. You could do it using the auto chopper, but I like this mode because it gives me a bit more control over what's going on. So I want to use this value to control this value here, and I want to be able to control that using a macro. The first thing I want to do is have it so that this line just goes from minus all the way down up to the middle line. So I'm going to bring the offset to -50. And I'm going to bring the depth to 50. So now we can see that this line goes from minus up to the center line, minus infinity up to the center line. So if I now map that to the gain, and we can see the gain chopping like that. Now, I want to be able to control the depth of that. So I'm going to connect both of those, Command G, and I'm going to use one macro. And when I move this macro all the way up, I want it to look like this, maximum depth of chop. And all the way down, I want this line to be on the center line. So I'm going to right click on the offset, map to macro 1, and I want that to go from -50 to 0. So I'm going to change that. And I want the depth. I'm also going to control that using the same macro, and I want that to go from all the way down. I want the depth to be 0. And all the way up, I want it to be 50. So I go from 0 to 50. I've done something wrong on the offset. The offset, is that the wrong way around? 0 to -50. Yes. Yes, there we go. Okay. So this one dial now controls the depth. So I can now go. Exactly. So I have one macro that I can use to control that. So let's call this depth. Again, I want to be able to control the rate. just going to say that straight up. So let's map that to macro 2. The sync, I'm also going to want to be able to control. So let's map that to macro 3. Sync on and off and on. Off, on, exactly. And this rate, I also want to map to the rate. So yeah, that gets slower as we go up. Exactly. And that gets, this goes the other way around. This gets faster as we go up. Let's undo that. Let's undo that. So let's go to this one, which now needs to go from all the way up to 0. So now they both get slower as the rate goes up. Exactly. Yeah, nice. That one does as well. Rate gets slower as I go up. Yeah, okay. So those two things are connected. Okay, what are some other things? Let's turn this all into a group. Select everything, Command G. And some other things I might like to do on this. Yes, attack. I'm going to right click, map to macro 1. Because sometimes we want the sound to fade in much slower than that. That's really nice to be able to control. Release as well. Let's map you to macro 2. So that, of course, after taking my finger off, it can also keep going and have a lovely fade out. That's really nice. Right, chopper stuff. Let's call this the chopper. Chopper depth. Let's map you to macro 3. And again, let's open up all of these. We're going to need all the macros. Chopper depth, chopper rate, map to macro 4. Chopper sync, map to macro 5. And also, I think the chopper rate. So I'm going to map that to macro 4 here and map you to macro 6. Let's rename these. So yeah, let's check that. Lovely. Oh, we can get sort of these lovely... Okay, let's turn the sync off. Oh yeah, we're going to get lots of these lovely effects. Let's make the depth quite thin. Lovely. And we can change the chopper shape as well, so we can get some triangle type stuff happening, or even some binary stuff. Lovely, lovely, lovely stuff. Okay, cool. Right. Okay, so I want to also be able to control the sample start. So I'm going to right click, map to macro. Let's start that stuff down here. So yeah, we can also change where the sample starts from. And some of these, I've got a lot of samples, and I'm going to bring in all of these bowed samples in here and use them all. And some of them are long and some of them are short. So I think it's also going to be interesting to have a way to sort of speed up maybe sometimes how quickly it plays through these samples. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a kind of a scan effect. This then kind of turns this whole situation into a bit of a almost a granular type approach. So what I want to do there is each time I press go on trigger this sample, I want to actually either be able to move this. So I'm going to use a MIDI effect for that. I'm going to use a MIDI envelope. Where have you gone? It's in modulators. Envelope MIDI. There it is. Right. No, it's not envelope MIDI. It's shaper MIDI. That's the one that I want. Shaper MIDI. Yes, exactly. And I want that to just go like that. And I want to delete that endpoint. Shift and click deletes points on that. Let's make that super long. Yes, and so basically I want to, each time I press a note, that this is connected with this. So I'm going to map. I'm going to turn you into one direction. I'm going to map that to that. So yeah, so that's also changing. We can see that moving the sample start position, which is creating a sort of little modular style effect, sort of little granular style effect. Okay, I want to be able to control how much that happens. So presumably if I bring the depth down on that. Why is all of a sudden... Let's turn the chopper depth down. I was wondering why it got glitchy for a second there. Chopper depth. So sample start. Let's turn this depth back up. So yeah, that's playing through the sample much quicker. That's nice. We can maybe even drag that up to 100. Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm going to map that to, let's map that to macro 10. That's a nice thing to be able to change, especially if we're using sort of, let's go back to sort of regular chopper rate, chopper on, da-da-da. That's cool. So it allows us to control how quickly it's sort of playing through the sample and how quickly those overtones and everything are changing, because that's the lovely thing about all these bode sounds is we get these overtones and dynamic sound type stuff. Okay, let's add a volume. Actually, I think that's going to be really helpful for this one. So I'm going to right click and let's map that to macro 16. So yeah, that's going to control the volume of everything. That can be a bit smaller. I'm going to save macro 8 because I want that to be to do with changing samples. We're going to get to that in a second. Macro 7, I think, let's control the tuning. Let's already actually turn the snap off on this. That's going to be helpful. Yeah, so let's transpose, map to macro 7, transpose. Yes, lovely. And maybe I want to do some looping stuff with this as well. So let's map you to macro 11. Loop off on. That's nice. Let's make sure the loop fades well up at 100%, so that when a loop does happen, it's not chopping it so much. We're aiming to create sort of a quite a continuous source sound with the ability to chop it over the top. That's nice. Okay. I think what's going to also be nice is to have a little bit of LFOing on the sample scan. So I'm going to bring in an LFO. Let's bring you in after here. And if I map that to that, why didn't that work? Map to here, please. It's because this is already mapped to there. So I can map you to there actually then. Yeah, lovely. Now this is a lot of depth on that, but what this will do, so we have let's turn the chopper depth down. So now we're also scanning backwards and forwards in the sample a little bit as it goes. You can see what's happening there. So we're going to create some really interesting sound effects from that, especially if we bring the rate up. It's making it super nice granular. These are some nice effects. Okay, so I want to be able to control the rate and the depth of that. Let's map you to macro 12. And let's map the depth to macro 13. Cool, so let's bring that depth down for now. Okay. I think some reverb in here is also going to be nice on this one. I want to bring the reverb in here after the chopper. So let's go audio effects. Let's go reverb. And I'm going to set it up the same as before. So I'm going to use the utility in front of it. Reverb, dry, wet. Group that. I'm going to map these two things, the gain to macro 1. It's the verb send. I'm going to change the range to only go up to 0. And the verb decay, it's mapped to macro 2. Now let's map these to macro 14 and macro 15. 14, macro 15. Lovely, so verb send and verb decay. Right, so now we have one macro left, and that's for the selection of the sound, which is also going to give us so many options when combined with all of these things. So what I'm going to do now, select, and I'm going to go Command G, going to group that big metal sheet. just by itself. And as you'll see, it's already copied across the macros and mapped them over here. So now what I'm going to do, because I want exactly the same settings, I'm just going to Command D, duplicate, and replace the sound. So I've got some mapping options open. I'm going to close those mapping options. So on the second one here, I'm just going to replace the sound with another sample from the same library. Let's gain that up a bit because that's super quiet. Adjust the start point a little bit. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring in a whole bunch of different sounds. So again, I'm not going to make you watch this. Okay, so now I've loaded in a whole bunch of bowed samples. Now what I'm going to do is use a chain selector connected with this macro to be able to easily switch between them. So I'm going to open up chain here. How many samples have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 26 samples, which means that this is chain selector 0. So then I want this one to be a chain selector 25. Bang. Select all of them. Right click, distribute ranges evenly. And now I have a chain selector that goes like that. Right click, map to any spare macro here. Macro 5 will do. Change the range to go from, so this is chain selector, where I chain select it from 0 to 25. And now right click on that, map to macro 8. And now I have a chain selector that allows me to change sample. Let's turn the volume up on all of them. Also I didn't add my extra channel into this, which is of course we're only hearing a reverb sound. Let's add a dry chain in there. Okay, yeah, so I don't need that up here. Oh, that's a nice ding on a metal plate. Yeah, so now we have all of these different ways of chop depth. Chopper, where's my chopper rate? Chopper rate. Cool. Different sounds. That's kind of nice. Let's change the chopper shape. Add a bit of reverb. Yeah, super nice. What happens if I, chop sync is off. So if I do something like this, this could be nice. Really nice. So let's we can collapse all of that now. Let's color some of this stuff. So the chopper stuff, let's make you all, whatever the color that is, chopper stuff. That one. Chain selector, you're kind of important. You can be white. This is to do with the sample start and scan stuff. So this can all be the same color. Sample loop, sample scan. Let's make the verbs kind of that color. Volume, you can be that color for this. And attack and release, you're the same function. So let's make you like that. Cool. And then we have, like, again, another really interesting, really usable rack that offers up so many different possibilities. So I'm going to reset everything to sort of a standard thing. Chopper depth off. I want to make sure. Well, let's go chain selector. The first sound. Reverb's down. Decay doesn't really matter. LFO scan depth is off. Chopper sync. Let's turn you. Well, it doesn't matter because you're not being used. Okay, so that's going to be as default as possible, just playing through each individual sound. That's a really nice sound. Okay, so let's call that default settings. You know what? Let's add a limiter to the end of all of this as well. Limiter's always a good idea to stop you blowing up parts of your studio. So let's add a limiter in here and just drag that down a bit so nothing's going to get too out of control. Nice. I'm going to exclude the volume from macro variations because, no, exclude from macro randomization. Okay, so let's do a random. Ah, what a cool sound. Do I want to do it? I think I just want to. Ah, wow. I'm going to save that. Super nice. Random, please. Sample start is way at the end. Oof. Oof. Yes, please. Ooh, I don't know what's going on there, but it's like some kind of digital cat. So as you can see, like just with these different things, we can go very quickly from this to this. Super fun. So there you have it. You don't have to record metals. You can record anything you want. You're adults. You can make your own decisions. Patreon members, of course, you can download these racks, download this whole project, including all the samples, 150 samples of me recording some metals. Non-Patreon members, you can access that too for the price of €3. Would love to hear what you guys are making. Would love to hear your thoughts about these kind of processes and what you're doing with them. So, yeah, enjoy. Until next time.